Have you ever heard of a man who appeared out of nowhere, blessed a warrior, and disappeared again, leaving behind a mystery that would echo for thousands of years? No. Then let me tell you the story of Melchizedek. Long ago, in the time when the world was younger and tribes ruled the land, a man named Abram was quietly becoming a legend. Abram wasn't a king. He didn't have a mighty army. But what he did have was something far more powerful. He had a promise from God. He had left everything behind, his homeland, his father's house, and all he knew, because God told him to go. No maps, no directions, just a voice and a promise. I will make you into a great nation, God had said. And through you, every family on earth will be blessed. It sounded impossible, especially since Abram had no children. But Abram believed. And belief is a dangerous thing to those who fear it. One day, trouble came knocking in the form of war. 5 kings from around the region, powerful, cruel, and greedy, rose up and challenged a group of smaller cities. Among them was a place called Sodom. It wasn't a good city. In fact, it was known for its wickedness. But that's where Abram's nephew Lot had moved, chasing wealth and comfort. He had left Abram's camp for a life in the city, not realizing he was walking straight into danger. The 5 kings swept through the region like a flood. They crushed the smaller kings, burned villages, and took whatever they wanted. When they reached Sodom, they destroyed it and captured everyone, including Lot and his family. They looted the city, bound the prisoners, and vanished into the wilderness, certain no one would follow. They didn't count on Abram. When a survivor stumbled into Abram's camp and told him what had happened, something shifted in Abram's eyes. He may have been a man of peace, but he was also a man of action. He didn't hesitate. He gathered 318 trained men from among his servants. Not soldiers, not warriors, shepherds, herders, farmers, but they were loyal, and that would be enough. Under the cover of night, Abram and his men chased the enemy across the land. Days passed. Then, under a moonlit sky, they struck. Using clever tactics and perfect timing, they divided their forces and attacked the kings from all sides. Panic broke out among the enemy ranks. They never expected to be followed, let alone outwitted by a small band of men. The battle was fierce but short. By morning, the kings were either dead or fleeing. Abram had won. He rescued Lot, brought back the stolen goods, and freed the other captives. It was a stunning victory, one that would echo across the land. And that's when the real mystery began. As Abram returned from the battlefield, dusty and tired but triumphant, 2 kings came out to meet him. The first was Bera, the king of Sodom, the same wicked city that had just been destroyed. He was grateful, but there was something off about him. His words were sweet, but his eyes held shadows. The second man was different. His name was Melchizedek. No one knew where he came from. He wasn't part of the battle. He wasn't from any of the known tribes. And yet, he walked right into the middle of a victory celebration like he belonged there. He was the king of Salem, a city whose name meant peace. And more than that, he was something even rarer. He was a priest of God Most High. Now think about that. This was long before Moses, before the 10 Commandments, before Israel even existed. And yet here was a man who worshipped the same God Abram did, a priest of the Most High. No idols, no false gods, just one true God. How did he know? Where did he learn? The Bible doesn't say. It simply presents him as he is, mysterious, powerful, and holy. Melchizedek didn't come with an army. He came with bread and wine, simple gifts, but rich with meaning. Then he did something no one expected. He blessed Abram. "Blessed be Abram by God Most High," he said, "creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." It wasn't a formal speech. It wasn't politics. It was real. It was as if Melchizedek saw Abram's heart, saw his faith, and confirmed everything Abram had believed. And Abram, this man who had just defeated 5 kings, did something equally unexpected. He gave Melchizedek 1/10 of everything. Not because he had to, not because anyone demanded it, but because he recognized who Melchizedek was. Abram saw in him a reflection of something divine. A man of peace. A priest of the true God. A king without arrogance. A mystery with meaning. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, Melchizedek was gone. No caravan. No palace. No long conversations. He came, he blessed, and he vanished from the pages of Genesis like a whisper. But his presence lingered. It left a mark, not just on Abram, but on history. Bera, the king of Sodom, tried to strike a deal with Abram after that. "Give me the people," he said, "but keep the goods for yourself." It was a tempting offer, a way to profit from the battle. But Abram refused. "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High," he said, "that I will not take anything that is yours, not even a thread or a sandal strap, so that you can never say, 'I made Abram rich.'" Why did he refuse? Because Melchizedek had reminded him of something. Abram wasn't just fighting for Lot. He wasn't just chasing justice. He was walking with God. And sometimes, when you walk with God, you must turn down even the most glittering reward. What started as a rescue mission had become something far greater. It had become a declaration. A quiet but powerful reminder that not all victories are won with swords, and not all kings wear crowns of gold. Sometimes, the most powerful king appears without warning, speaks a blessing, and disappears, leaving behind only questions, hope, and the echo of something eternal. That was Melchizedek. Who was he really? Where did he come from? Why did he worship the same God as Abram before there was even a chosen people? No one knows for sure. But some say he was more than a man. Some say he was a shadow of things to come. A glimpse of a future priest king who would bring peace to the world. A forerunner. A symbol. A mystery wrapped in flesh. And that mystery was only just beginning. Word spread like wildfire. They spoke of the king who defeated 5 mighty kings with only a handful of men. They spoke of a daring midnight raid and the fearless rescue of captives. They spoke of a holy man, mysterious and majestic, who arrived with bread, wine, and a blessing, and then vanished into the fog of history. But it was Melchizedek they couldn't stop whispering about. Where did he come from? Some asked. Who made him priest? Others wondered. No father. No mother. No tribe. No origin. Is he even human? A few dared to whisper. Back at his camp, Abram sat alone under the stars, thinking. His servants had returned to their tents. The rescued families were safe. The spoils of war were untouched. But Abram's mind wasn't on gold or glory. He was still thinking about the moment he met Melchizedek. There was something about the man, something beyond the surface. Abram had faced kings and warlords. He had seen wealth, ambition, pride. But Melchizedek was different. When he had spoken, it was like the air changed. His words didn't just fall, they sank deep. They settled into the soul, like seeds planted in good earth. And the blessing, oh, that blessing. It still echoed in Abram's heart. But who was he? The land around Abram was filled with priests, but not like Melchizedek. Pagan altars littered the valleys, drenched in blood and smoke, raised to gods with names that changed from one tribe to another. But Melchizedek's God wasn't one of them. He had called him El Elyon, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. That name mattered. It wasn't just respectful, it was specific. It matched the voice Abram had heard years ago. The voice that had called him out of Ur. The voice that made promises in the silence. Melchizedek spoke as if he knew that voice too. Abram remembered how the priest king had held the bread and wine, not as weapons or payment, but as sacred symbols. The bread had been warm, the wine rich. Nothing lavish, but deeply meaningful. It was a meal shared between heaven and earth, offered without a word of demand. Why? Why would a king of peace, who wasn't part of Abram's war, come bearing food and blessing? And why did it feel like he had been waiting all along? Far away, in the city of Salem, the people also wondered. Their king had returned, but not in the way kings usually do. He brought no prisoners, no slaves, no treasure. He came with empty hands and full eyes, looking like a man who had just stepped through a veil. They asked him where he had gone. He only said, to meet a man chosen by God. They asked if he had taken soldiers. He replied, "No swords were needed." Some dismissed him as strange. Others knelt and listened. The city of Salem, quiet, peaceful, hidden among the hills, remained a place untouched by the wars that plagued the earth. People said it was because of Melchizedek, that his prayers held back darkness, that his presence kept the land pure. Still, questions followed him like shadows. No one could remember when he first arrived. No one knew his parents or his lineage. In a world built on bloodlines, that was unheard of. But Melchizedek needed no ancestry to prove his worth. His authority didn't come from men. It came from above. And then, he stopped appearing. Just like that. No grand farewell. No tomb. No heir. It was as if the moment his role was done, he stepped back into mystery, like a stone cast into still water that leaves ripples but no trace. Years passed. Then decades. Abram became Abraham. He had a son, Isaac. Then came Jacob. Then 12 sons. Then a nation. A people chosen and set apart. God led them through deserts, delivered them from Egypt, gave them laws, prophets, judges, and kings. And still, Melchizedek's name lingered, unshaken. In the time of King David, long after Abram had passed into legend, the name Melchizedek surfaced again, like a spark from an old fire. David had been thinking deeply about the coming Messiah. Not just a king, but someone greater, someone eternal. A rescuer, a redeemer, a priest. And as he wrote, the Spirit moved him to speak words that would puzzle scholars for centuries. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek. Psalm 110 verse 4. Not in the order of Levi. Not in the priesthood of Aaron. But Melchizedek. Why? Because Melchizedek's priesthood was older, deeper, not based on birthright, but on calling, not bound by age or ritual, but rooted in eternity. And then, silence again. For hundreds of years, Melchizedek was just a name in one strange verse. The priests of Israel came and went. The temple rose and fell. Empires invaded. Prophets cried out. But still, no one truly understood what David had meant. Not until much later. When Jesus of Nazareth walked the earth, he didn't look like a priest. He wasn't from the tribe of Levi. He wasn't trained in the temple. He didn't wear the robes. Yet he spoke with authority. He healed with a word. He forgave sin. He claimed to be one with the Father. And when he shared bread and wine with his followers, the night before his death, some remembered. Bread and wine. Peace and blessing. A meal before mystery. Then, after he rose from the dead, everything changed. The early followers of Jesus, especially the writer of the book of Hebrews, began to understand something that had been hidden in plain sight. Jesus wasn't a priest like the others. He didn't fit the mold. His priesthood didn't begin with bloodlines or rituals. It began before time. It was like Melchizedek's. Actually, it was Melchizedek's order. The same type of priesthood. One that doesn't end. Melchizedek, the writer of Hebrews said, is without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. He resembles the Son of God, and he remains a priest forever. Hebrews 7 verse 3. He wasn't saying Melchizedek was Jesus, but he was saying something important. Melchizedek was a sign, a foreshadowing, a living symbol of what Jesus would be. A priest and a king. A giver of bread and wine. A bringer of peace. Someone whose authority didn't come from men, but from God. Someone eternal. And now, here we are, thousands of years later, and still Melchizedek stands as one of the Bible's greatest mysteries. No backstory. No death record. Just a few verses that have shaken generations. Some say he was an angel. Some say he was a vision. Some say he was Jesus himself, appearing before his birth, a divine figure cloaked in flesh for just one moment. Others say he was simply a man who walked closely with God, closer than most, chosen for a moment that would echo through eternity. The truth? We may never know on this side of history. But what we do know is this: Melchizedek matters. Because in a world of noise and war, he brought quiet and peace. Because in a world of ambition and greed, he gave without taking. Because in a world of names and bloodlines, he stood apart, defined not by where he came from, but by who he served. And perhaps most of all, because he reminds us that God's plans are bigger, older, and deeper than we can imagine. Sometimes, the greatest signs come not in loud declarations, but in soft blessings. Not with swords, but with bread. Not with fear, but with peace. And just when you think you've figured it all out, someone like Melchizedek steps onto the stage, says one holy sentence, and disappears, leaving behind a mystery that refuses to be forgotten. You'd think a man who only appears in a handful of Bible verses would be easy to forget. But Melchizedek never fades. He lingers like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit, yet somehow unlocks the whole picture. No family, no origin, no ending. A king, a priest, a shadow, a sign. And if you're paying attention, you start to see the outline of someone greater. His name was mentioned once by Moses, once by David, and then, centuries later, his mystery exploded in the New Testament like a star long hidden behind clouds. It happened in a letter, a long, deep letter written to believers who were struggling. The early Christians were caught between two worlds. Some had come from Judaism and knew the weight of the law. Others were Gentiles, new to faith, confused by ritual and sacrifice. Many were persecuted, tired, wondering if following Jesus was worth it. So the writer of the book of Hebrews sat down with one goal: to show them that Jesus wasn't just a good teacher. He wasn't just a prophet or a miracle worker. He was everything. And right in the middle of that letter, Melchizedek returned. Like a whisper from Genesis. Like a spark struck in David's psalm. Like a voice saying, "You've seen me before. You just didn't know what you were looking at." The writer explained that Jesus wasn't just a new kind of teacher. He was a new kind of priest. Not like the priests of Aaron who had to keep offering sacrifices over and over. Not like the high priests who had to purify themselves before they could even enter God's presence. Not like men who died and had to be replaced, generation after generation. No, Jesus was different. He was the high priest. Perfect. Eternal. Without sin. A priest forever. And to make that point crystal clear, the writer brought up Melchizedek. This Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He met Abraham and blessed him. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Hebrews 7 verses 1 to 2. Then came the explanation. Melchizedek wasn't just a historical footnote. He was a blueprint, a prototype, a living prophecy of what Jesus would become. Let's break it down. Melchizedek was both a king and a priest. That was unheard of in ancient Israel. Kings came from Judah. Priests came from Levi. You couldn't be both. But Jesus was. Just like Melchizedek. Melchizedek's name meant king of righteousness. And he ruled over Salem, which means peace. That made him both king of righteousness and king of peace. Jesus? Same titles, but greater in every way. Melchizedek had no genealogy listed. No beginning. No end. He seemed timeless. That doesn't mean he was literally eternal, but symbolically, he pointed to someone who was. The conclusion? He is without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, and remains a priest forever. Hebrews 7 verse 3. Resembling the Son of God. Not the same, but resembling. Melchizedek wasn't Jesus, but he was a glimpse, a preview, like a silhouette on the wall before the real figure steps into the light. Imagine a courtroom. The priests of the Old Covenant standing on one side. Robes, scrolls, sacrifices. They say, "This is how it's always been." Then Jesus enters. He doesn't wear what they wear. He doesn't come from the tribe they expect. But the writer of Hebrews points to Melchizedek and says, "This is the pattern. This is the proof." If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, why was there still need for another priest to come? one in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7 verse 11. It was a shift, a revolution. Jesus wasn't just patching the old system. He was replacing it with something better. A priest who doesn't die. A priest who doesn't sin. A priest who doesn't need to sacrifice for himself before helping others. A priest who brings us directly to God. That's who Melchizedek was pointing to all along. But here's where it gets personal. This isn't just theology. It's not just an interesting twist in the Bible storyline. It matters for you, because every one of us needs a priest. Not a man in a robe. Not someone behind a curtain. But someone who can stand between us and God. Someone who knows our weakness. Someone who can lift the weight of guilt from our backs. Someone who doesn't just offer sacrifices for us, but is the sacrifice. That's Jesus, the forever priest. The one Melchizedek hinted at with bread and wine. The one who didn't just bless a hero, but died for his enemies. The one who didn't just serve a meal, but became the meal. When Jesus offered the bread and wine to his disciples the night before the cross, he wasn't just creating a new tradition. He was fulfilling an ancient symbol. The bread and wine Melchizedek gave Abram, that was the trailer. Jesus' Last Supper, the feature. And today, every time we take communion, we step into that eternal connection. That mystery. That moment where the story of Melchizedek and the mission of Jesus meet in perfect harmony. So why does Melchizedek matter? Because his life reminds us that God is always one step ahead. Before Abram had a son, before Moses climbed Sinai, before Israel marched through the wilderness, God had already laid the foundation for something greater. A better priest. A better promise. A better covenant. One that can never be broken. The priesthood of Melchizedek wasn't about rules or rituals. It was about relationship. About direct access to God. About blessing instead of burden. Peace instead of fear. Jesus didn't come to keep us stuck in the past. He came to bring us into something new. Something eternal. And Melchizedek's short, mysterious appearance was the signpost pointing the way. Let's step back and look at the story from the beginning. Abram steps into a battlefield and wins a victory no one expected. A mysterious priest king appears, blesses him, and shares bread and wine. Abram recognizes his authority, gives a tenth, and walks away changed. Melchizedek disappears from the scene but not from history. David picks up the thread 1,000 years later and speaks of a priest forever. Jesus arrives, dies, rises, and takes up the mantle of Melchizedek's order. And now, thousands of years after that first meeting, people around the world, young and old, rich and poor, kneel before the true King of Peace. It's one story, woven together by threads only God could have designed. And now, you're part of it too. When you trust in Jesus, you're stepping into that same line. You're not just following a teacher or obeying a rulebook. You're being carried by a high priest who will never die, never fail, and never turn you away. He doesn't need to reapply for the job. He doesn't age. He doesn't need sacrifices to cleanse himself. He simply is. Forever. And just like Melchizedek, he brings you peace. He offers you blessing. And he invites you to the table, where the bread is warm, the wine is rich, and the presence of God is near. That's not fiction. That's not folklore. That's the truth. And it all started with a strange figure on a quiet road, one man blessing another with a message that would outlast kingdoms, cross continents, and echo through eternity. Melchizedek. The man with no past. The priest with no end. The shadow of a savior who would bring heaven and earth back together. Not just once, but forever. Make sure to subscribe for more deeper Bible stories like this. Thank you.